All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm Ann Russo, Executive Director with the Building Officials Association of Florida, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. This is a webinar. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We'll reserve time for Q&A at the end, and this session is being recorded and will be available later for viewing. And today's program is a 1-hour continuing education course titled A Review of the Private Provider Statute. Our presenter is BOAF Past President Glenn Dodson, building official for the city of Tallahassee with over 27 years experience in building code enforcement. Please note, we are not attorneys, and the comments shared today reflect professional opinions only. This presentation is not a substitute for reviewing the statute with your city or county attorney. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Glenn Dodson.
Okay, welcome. Good afternoon to most of you, and good morning to some of you, and that are in the area to the west of me. So, with that, I will. This is a presentation that we did back in. If you were at the annual conference in 2024, this will be a refresher for you. It's the same path. There may be a few new things that got added, but not a lot since 2024. As some of the guys that I spoke to, I said, why are you joining this webinar? Because the same if we did in 2024. I said, oh, you weren't paying attention when I did it in 24. So for now, we're going to have this refresher, and let me try to get on the correct screen here where I can advance the slides with that. So if you'll notice, and Ann said this is an accredited course, not only for ICC, but for architects, and it's also has a building code administrator and inspector board certification, which is also for you guys that have contractor license can be reciprocated. All right. Okay, some kind of objectives that we're looking for here. Of course, we're doing this for at the time I did it at the conference, was a room of building officials, but also we have a lot of private providers that are in our association, and it's a good mix. And so basically this is to both groups, and the main objective is to help you learn to locate and identify various components of Florida statutes 553791. And basically we are not going to get too much in the weeds as far as applying the sections to real world. You may pop up a question or whatever. If you have a situation, if we have time, we'll be able to maybe look at that. And it's very interesting as you go around the state. And the state of Florida is, and I tell everybody, is so diverse in the different sizes of jurisdictions, I will say, and the different way that we do anything. So you will hear different interpretations of the statute as you move to different local areas. I think as I started out in doing this webinar at the conference, I started with the line of, y'all are doing this all wrong. So, when I hear in the executive committee has had a lot of questions popped up, it seems like over the last several months, of different situations where members have been asking us, well, I got this situation, what does it say? So hopefully we'll just direct you to where to go in the statute. Like I said, I want you to be able to interpret it yourself and be able to find the answer. And certainly one thing that is very good, and I'm privileged that I have a moderate sized staff, not a huge staff. but I have very good advisors that are around me that is familiar with the statute. And, there may be jurisdictions where you just are the only one there and you might not have that. But the Building Officials Association of Florida is here to kind of help with that. So you could reach out to us with those questions, and we will probably give you 8 or 10 different opinions. It depends on what the question is. So with that, we're going to open up a poll if Celeste will pull that up. And just kind of, you got about 20 seconds to say, hey guys, how familiar are you with the Florida statute 553791? With that, Celeste, open up the poll.
It's up there.
Just while you're filling, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I said it's up there.
Okay, good deal. While you guys are filling that out, or just clicking on the one that applies to you, just to give you some kind of history of this statute. This statute goes all the way back to 2003. It was introduced into law at that time, and as we kind of moved, I jotted down a few notes on. In 2003, it started. I know that we put it in policy here in the city of Tallahassee about that time. 2007, one of the things that I'll kind of harp on is the definition of an audit. And then the definition of an audit was added in 2007. In 2017, originally it was architects and engineers were the only ones that could be private providers. In 2017, it was opened up to the building code administrators, people licensed as building officials, were also added. And in 2019, we started messing with it. We basically, we didn't change the definition of audit, but we kind of put some language in there, making it more restrictive. And I'll touch on that later as we go through it. And then as recently as 2024, we added we added an audit procedure, and then we added a review time shortening that was for architect and engineers. And then here last year in 2025, we kind of increased the definition of single trade. It got expanded and reduced the review time on that. So Celeste, you want to post those results?
Glenn, are you seeing those? Do you see the poll results, Glenn?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that was not the one that I was referring to, but that's good. I had that later in the slide, but that's okay. All right. So it looks like we've got the, a balance of building officials and inspection and plan review staff. With also staff that has office permit techs and other, and we got some others. That's good. All right, just to clarify the statute name, it's very interesting. All of us call it the private provider statute. When you get into the legal terms, it does have the definition of private provider, but it is part of 553 building construction standards, which we go to part 4 of that, which puts us in the Florida Building Code. And then as we drill down into that is where we get 553.791, which is alternate plan review and inspection, is the actual name of the section where we use as having private providers. This slide here is the statute layout. I will say that this, if you don't take anything else away from that, try to capture this screen. I use this screen all the time when somebody has a question about something that I haven't thought of in a while and I need to, this will carry you to that section of the statute, and the numbers line up with the actual sections in the statute. So like the other day, somebody had a question about making a local rule to do something. So I knew that I could jump over to section 17. So this is probably kind of you guys that are licensed, you'll understand this when you're taking the test to get your inspectors or plan examiner license. You don't have to know the whole book. You just have to know where to find it real quick. That's what this is. All right. I think we done move on to the next one because we did that poll to start out with. I'm going to go and just break down some definitions to start with. Starting with the definition, as I already said, a private provider. As in the statute now, it is a building code administrator that's licensed under Chapter 468, or an engineer under Chapter 471, or architect under 481. Also included in that, and it's been that way since the inception, is if you have additions and alterations that are 1,000 square foot or less on a residential building, anyone that is licensed that has a standard certificate as an inspector or a plans examiner, whatever you're doing under 468, can act as a private provider in those on those smaller jobs. The majority of what we see is either building code administrators, architects, engineers as being the key person that's a private provider. Another definition is the definition for the duly authorized representative. And this is recently kind of brought up some questions that we've had to look at and clarify. But it is an agent of the private provider kind of being the qualifier, we'll say, of the company. And those individuals that are actually going out and doing that are doing the plan review or going out doing the inspections are required to be licensed as an engineer under 471, architect under 481, or actually have the standard or provisional certificate under 468. And just note that if somebody has applied to the Building Code Administrators Board and has a provisional certificate for that company, that that person has to be under the direct supervision of a building code administrator for that company. So someone that has a provisional could not be reporting to an architect or engineer that is running the private provider company. So, and I also think there's language in other parts of the statute in 468 that if you change companies, you have to notify the Building Code Administrators and Inspectors Board in writing that you're changing if you have a provisional certificate. And you have to tell them that you're whatever company that you're going to. That is the same for jurisdictions. If someone has a provisional certificate for a jurisdiction and they're going to another jurisdiction, they would need to provide in writing to the board that they're no longer worked under the one that they got qualified, but tell them where they're going. This is a new term that got entered in 2025. It was in January 2025, and we brought in this term, private provider firm. And it's a business organization, which most of the, private providers are some kind of entity that is either a corporation or a partnership or some other kind of legal entity, and it would have board members, and it would have people that basically qualify the company. And the person that is actually the private provider for the private provider firm is required to be licensed as a building code administrator, engineer, or architect. Permit application. Pull this out of the definition. Basically, it's it's properly completed and submitted application. I know here in Tallahassee, we're 100% digital. So the application is what we get through our portal. And it basically, we get the application, we charge an application fee, which we'll discuss fees a little bit later. And then we open up the portal for the plans to be uploaded. The plans, of course, would be reviewed if by the private provider. They would have an affidavit saying what they reviewed, along with any fees that we charge. A very important part of it, and we require a document here at the City of Tallahassee that is it breaks down what other government approvals are required. In other words, ours was said in just not all inclusive, but that you got to if it's a commercial, you got to get a fire review. Here at the City of Tallahassee, we own our own utilities, so it goes through our city electric utility review. It goes to two different ones. We have it goes through environmental, it goes through zoning. So we ask, have you already received those approvals? In other words, if say environmental, you would already have your environmental permit application and completed. If it's in process, and we do them concurrent, so you'd have to say no, it's not. But really, the application includes, particularly for most jurisdictions, all that kind of one-stop shop. And so we need to know which approvals have been placed and which have not, been approved. Guys, this definition right here, I will say, I said this when I was doing this at the conference in 2024, is this definition is from 2007. So it's been tweaked a little bit, but it has not been really done where it matches what the rest of the statute is. I'll say that it was part of the information is incorrect, and the reason so is it was done in 2007, and the rest of the statute read different than it does now. So we've added parts in the rest of the statute, but we did not go back and correct the definition of an audit. If you break it down, it's basically the audit is to confirm the process that the services, whatever it may be by the private provider, whether it's inspection or plan review, has been done. And in the section I have highlighted there in the center is basically it part of the audit, and this is with the 07 part, is that it included the documentation that you receive for the plan review, and also for the mandatory inspections that are required by the Florida Building Code. So that's the part that gets a little, when you look at other sections, particularly the section that got tweaked when we get there, section 20, it does not relate well, because that is a source of confusion. Because if you read that top part, basically when I take a document, I'm doing an audit, but that is not what an audit is. There's other sections in the statute that basically goes over what an audit is. And the last part of that, we added in this section here about that you may not replicate the plan review and inspection, but unless it's expressly authorized by another section of the statute, which there are several places that says that you can actually go and check stuff as we go through this. So this is an area that we attempted last year to get fixed in the statute, but we were unsuccessful of getting a sponsorship for the bill to correct it. And there's enough language in the rest of the statute that this definition of audit could probably just be taken out. And if there's areas that is important to, we could probably move it to another section, and it wouldn't be as confusing if we just went and actually struck through the whole definition of an audit. Request for certificate of occupancy or certificate of completion. When you have a job that's done by a private provider, you go to section 12. It requires them, when they're finished with the job, to provide a certificate of compliance, basically saying that it's been completed and according to the plans. There may be fees that have to be paid before you can get the CO. Another important aspect of that, which we kind of run into all the time, is there's other documents, and you guys can relate to this if you're run a building department. It's just there's a lot more than just the Florida Building Code items that kind of falls back into the building permitting process that the building official has to look at and process. So an example of that, if I go to CO a brand new building, I have to make sure that it has completed its environmental permit and that we have approval for environmental. Has nothing to do with the building, but the environmental work is required by our ordinance and different statutes to be completed and have the exterior site work done and completed. So the last part of this is part of getting that certificate of occupancy and certificate of completion is making sure that all of the other governmental approvals that are required by law have been approved before we issue that CO. There's a definition of single trade inspection, and it is it basically includes your typical MEPs that we normally deal with. But this last time in 2025, we added into that definition solar energy and energy storage installations, or either alterations to those particular ones. So this is the typical smaller jobs that you would see added into, because there was some confusion about the solar being a single trade, but it does involve electrical and solar typically when you are putting in a house. But we have one permit that we do for that, but it is inclusive of the solar energy projects. Very brief definition of site work. It's basically, as I was saying before, it's part of the construction project. It's not necessarily the building structure, but it is required that you have that in before you actually complete the building. So let's do another poll. this ought to be an interesting one. It's we have these questions pop up all the time of the things that you got to go through in your jurisdiction. All right. Yeah, it's just very it's kind of this goes along with kind of par for the course. Incomplete and missing documentation is like 2/3 of the issue. And not only does we have it with private providers, but you guys, I'll flip it over. We have that with a lot of contractors. You have to, I don't know, a kind of a separate poll of mine is, and I do not have plan reviews that typically get everything uploaded and correct the first time around. So you run into the same situation when you're dealing, with private provider projects. And it could be that the private provider, they've just give you the information they've got and they can just deal with what they've got. And they maybe are not getting the information to actually approve it and place it where it's at. It's kind of interesting about the delayed inspection reports. It's and I maybe it's just a jurisdiction. We have to ask for some reports sometimes, and it's just a oversight that is in the software. I have several private providers that are working with us that they have their own software, and we've run into the case where there've been software issues where the contractor requests the inspection in the private provider software, and the software is supposed to automatically generate the notification and actually send the inspection report when the inspector does it. And we've run across recently some issues where it was not that they didn't do the inspection, and it was an automated deal where we did not receive the inspection reports. Okay, I'm gonna just kind of go through. Like I said, this is mainly an overview for this, and we'll try to leave some time as we get a few minutes to maybe to have Ann field some questions. But when I started putting this together, I went, what's the process? That's this. The process is on this slide. So what do we go through? And this replicates whether you're using, this private provider statute should merit into your process that you're using because it is alternate plan review and alternate inspections. So it should follow closely to the process. There are some sections in the statute that you would need to be aware of. First thing, under the process, an owner or a contractor can choose to use a private provider. And we'll look at some other stuff that says you can't tell them that they can't use a private provider as long as they follow the rules and that is laid out in the statute. The other thing is the permit fees are required to be reduced in now there's a wide spectrum across like I said, Florida's diverse. So my staff does not look like the staff next door. So I have more administrative costs. I had to do things I process a little different. So my reduction in fees may be less, but the way I went into it is we sit down and broke out, and now typically most of the private provider projects are single family houses. So we took our single family house permit and we went, okay, how many hours do we put in inspections? How much time do we put in plan review? Relatively short. When we did that analysis and kind of broke it down with the hours and the hours that we put into actually issuing a permit, like I said, there's a big part of the administration part of tying other departments in, because we're that one-stop shop. We're getting approvals from other departments. So we have to take that into our process as far as entering it in, not necessarily that you're counting your time, but it's actually building inspection personnel time to make sure that those pieces of the puzzle are there to make it complete. So there's different numbers. There's no set number. I know that in the past several times they've tried to put in language in the statute that says that you should reduce the fees to this X amount, a percent or whatever. The problem I have with that is that it is a one shoe fits all. So we have to recognize that we have different size jurisdictions that have different requirements on staff time. And then I would say that everyone should do the breakdown. Don't just pick a number out of the air, but actually sit down and figure out exactly how much time is being spent on administrative, on permit processing, and then how much time is being spent on the actual plan review, how much time is being spent on the inspection of those structures to get it to CO, because then you go from plan review and inspections, which is done under the statute. Then you still, some jurisdictions, a very easy process to do a CO. Ours is relatively easy. If all the inspections have been, we enter all the inspections in for the private provider, and you click a button and you can have the CO where it's available for the applicant or the contractor to download. Some jurisdictions are not that way. They may have to go through a manual process. So that would be administrative time to even issue that CO. So that's kind of a long-winded thing on the reduction of the fees, because I get asked all the time, how much should the fees be reduced? And I was like, well, I don't know your process. You got to go through your process and break it down, read into the statute, and it is in section 2B to see exactly how you need to break those fees down. There's another section in there about providing access to permitting and inspection documents. That's a little kind of confusing. As you drill down into that, it appears like it may be where you have an issue with someone that maybe we'll say that it's a homeowner that's in law enforcement. All their information is redacted. You pull up our information. I mean, the public would do, if you pull up the information, it doesn't show any information. It doesn't show address or whatever. But since the private provider is doing an inspection plan review, they have to be provided with that information. It's like our property appraisers. You pull up a law enforcement officer, it won't even give you their information. It redacts it out. So that's kind of where I think that section is leading us. It does say that also that we should form some type of system of registration. I know that we use the same process for the private provider registration as we do for contractors, of getting them into our system. They get attached just like a contractor to the permit. So that's they send in the information, their who their qualifier is, we'll say, and then they give us their staff, just list of staff, their license, on who's going to be doing the inspections and plan review, provide their insurance information, which I think there's a slide I have on the insurance requirements, but we enter that into our system. Going back to what I said, every department that you go to, some are very similar, some are very different. Some may have a manual process of doing that registration. So, but with us going more into a digital world, we have to be able to embrace the electronic. I mean, it's in statute now that you have to allow for electronic submission of plan. So kind of the same thing with the registration. You have to have a process in place. Doesn't have to be an elaborate system. I mean, you could probably handle it through emails and PDFs to enter into your system. Okay, notification. Basically, this is the private provider. It's a document, and there is state forms out there. If you guys need to, that is on DBPR's website, and certainly you could reach out to me if you wanted to see them. We just took the ones that are established by rule through the board, but there is a form that they have to fill out that says to notify the building official. Notice a building official form. It is changed. It changed in January 2025. Used to say the fee owner had to sign it, authorizing having that acknowledgement that the private provider is going to do this work. But now it can be the fee owner's contractor can do it. We've seen a lot of that where contractors are, even though they act as the agent for the owner, they're using private providers and providing that acknowledgement in the notice of building official form. On that form, it's got a list what type of service the private provider is doing, where they're doing plan review and inspections or inspections only. We require, and I think I got it on a different slide, that if a private provider is going to do the plan review, we also require them, I think it's in section 2, that they also do the inspections. If they're doing the plan review, they need to be doing the inspections here. But the jurisdiction can make that decision of which way they wanted to go with that. Like I said, the registration part is you provide the contact information for the private provider, their insurance. They should be already in your system. If not, then we need to get all that information, get them registered, and get them in the system where they can be. Where if anybody pulls the historical information on that permit, that they can recognize that the private provider is the one that either did the plan review or inspections for that job. There is a section 5, that says after construction has started. So somebody started on the building, but before they have done any of the inspections, that they can, or if the local building official is actually doing, that's what that section 5 says, is if for some reason you got a ton of projects and you're taking a week or two to get to the inspections, then it says timely manner. Used to say timely manner. It just says unable to provide the inspection services. Then they can switch to a private provider, and there's a notification process for that. Okay, private providers doing plan review. Any duly authorized representative that is actually reviewing the plans must be appropriately licensed and have the certification and reference back to section 3 for doing that. So a reviewer that is looking at the electrical component of a building must have the license as electrical plan reviewer. Or if it's a residential, they could have a residential plans examiner license, which is a voluntary category right now. But they would have to be licensed in the category for them to do the review. They are required to provide affidavit of compliance in Section 6. And one of the things that kind of got introduced with this, with last year, with the single trades, and it's more in the probably the solar, is it does allow them to use automated or software-based system for the plan review. And I would say that they would probably acknowledge that they've used that system, for the review to review that, and you would need to just confirm that it is based on the Florida Building Code, because I know a bunch of the software-based systems may not be based on the Florida Building Code. The compliance affidavit, I mentioned this about it. It could be submitted electronically. Doesn't necessarily have to be a elaborate system. We chose to go simple. We do ours mainly through email. We may be looking at software, which allows the private provider to upload their affidavit or put in that compliance directly into a software. But right now we do it by email, but we may be progressing to a different area, and then we may have to reassess our administrative part. If you reduce your administrative time, remember, you got to reduce the fees. So that last one that I have there, that was the one I was talking about in Section 2, where we require, if the private provider is doing the plan review, that there's a section in there that says you can also require, the local building official can require them to also do the inspections. Okay, permit application time frames. There is specific time frames in Section 7 related to the time to actually look over the plans. I would say look over the application. I don't want to say look over the plans. But if you have any obvious plan deficiencies, you've basically got a 20-day window to look at that. And if you respond back, you're required to send a written notice that with your comments, written comments saying, hey, I just happen to notice that a common thing we see, especially up here in North Florida, is we'll get plans that doesn't even say that it's in compliance with the Florida Building Code. It'll be designed under the international code. So that would be something that's just maybe on the cover page that you would pick up. That would be a deficiency that needs to be corrected on the plans. There may be other specific things. You got to be careful about not getting into 100% plan review, but I know we require that the private providers put a little stamp or something acknowledging each page of not just on the affidavit say if they were reviewing 10 pages, they put that on their affidavit. I'm reviewing 10 pages. Well, I kind of click through and go, okay, I see that there's 10 pages uploaded. So it matches. It's just the numbers match up. Not that I'm sitting there going through each of the plans, but just making sure the documentation is correct. Basically, you have that 20-day period to do that. And anytime you maybe notice a deficiency, you would it kind of reduces it down and adds 5 more days to it. There is a new timeline that got added in 2025, and it is related to single trade plan review for single family and two family dwelling is reduced to 5 business days. Where we see this one a lot is on rooftop solar systems that are going on single family dwellings. If the owner or contractor chooses to use a private provider for that plan review and inspection, then within 5 business days of that submission of an application, you either got to issue it or either provide a deficiency, any written deficiencies that you may have. All right, moving on to inspections. The required inspections, is in section 9. And we look at the Florida Building Code for us actually seeing what the required inspections is. I know even in our software, we have additional inspections that are entered in there that sometimes depends on the job we may enter. But, we may enter it. We actually have fire and environmental that, key in on our software. But it's only the ones the private provider are doing are only the ones that are in the required inspections that are in the Florida Building Code. A change that happened in January 2025 is that notification to the building official notifying an inspection is being done. They just got to provide the approximate date and time. It used to say they had to do it a day ahead of time at a certain time, but they just got to make notification that inspection is taking place. There's a section in there in section 11 of the statute that allows for emergency situations and also in the Florida Building Code, you have that. Basically, if you have a emergency situation where you got to do a permit, emergency permit, they just got to report those inspections, they inspect it within 3 days of the permit, and then a day after the inspection, give you notification. One thing that we've run into several times is the private provider must provide a signed inspection report. And this can be waived by the building official. I know that some jurisdictions that do not receive those reports. We do, and we do require them to be signed. The language in the statute, if you drill down into it, it would allow for the private provider to provide the signed inspection report. We typically like the duly authorized representative to put their signature on there, put their name on there with their license number. We should already have that information. But the statute actually allows for both of them. So, and then also in section 9, the building official can visit the site as often as they feel necessary to verify that the private provider is performing all of the required inspection. That is in section 9. I don't know about you guys, but I'm too busy to visit all those sites. So even with my own inspectors. So but if you have a complaint or issue, you are allowed to go out and visit those sites. This is kind of flipped it around. This is notices that are provided by the local building official. As we were talking about the written deficiencies, in section 15, there's a process for letting them know that either the plans or the building construction do not comply. If you remember your time frames, if you see something wrong with the plans or application, remember your time frames that you're working in. And the building official can post a stop work order if he feels like there is an immediate threat to public safety. If that is the case, if you post a stop work order, then you must be available to meet with the private provider within 2 days after that. This is jumping to the insurance requirement. This is in section 18. The private provider, either firm or private provider themselves, are required to have professional liability in the amount of $1 million per occurrence and $2 million for aggregate. And that is when the construction cost is $5 million or less. If it is greater than $5 million, then they're required to have $2 million per occurrence and $4 million in aggregate. I threw this slide in there because a lot of questions come up about disciplinary actions against maybe a private provider. There is a section in 468.621 that you can kind of look at as far as the guidelines, but just realize that when you make those complaints, it's going to go to the professional board that the private provider is certified under. So if it's a building code administrator, it would go, it would actually all go to DBPR, but it would go to the building code administrators board. Kind of the same thing with the professional board of engineers, if it was an engineer. Section 19 covers basically says it's going to says kind of the same thing I just said. It is once the complaint process and investigation, which is probably going to go through the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, then it will, any of that stuff, that processing, it kind of gets handed over very quick to the professional board that is responsible for that licensee. All right. This is a very confusing section. It's the section 20, the audit limitations. Remember I was saying when we talked about the definition of an audit that it was kind of incorrect. It was old and outdated, needed to be corrected. Here's one of the sections that basically kind of jump on that and make it where it doesn't match this section when it goes to the limitations of an audit. It is, as I got on the slide, it's very confusing. The language that got put in really does not read very well. It's kind of listed as standard operating private provider audit procedures, which you would think that would be great. We've got a process for, and a bunch of jurisdictions have processes to audit the procedures of private providers. But then the next thing it says is this is for internal inspection and review staff. So basically you got to have a process set up to do your own internal staff and review. And before you can audit a private provider. And kind of the gist of that is you follow the same process, the audit process that you would go through with your own staff with the private providers. So I would, one thing I know that the Building Officials Association of Florida is working on, is actively working on maybe a template for audit procedures, trying to comply with this section of the code. And you have to kind of make it public facing. You have to put it online, and you have to have any internal staff audit for the last 2 quarters or 6 months, we should say. And it has to, you can only audit the private provider 4 times in a calendar year. Very quickly, as we're running out of time, goodness gracious. Local limitations is in section 17. I mentioned that. What it basically says is you can't make any rules or procedures or policies or anything that is kind of more stringent than this statute. Even going back into 2A, it says that you can't make processes that basically rule out the statute. This is, private providers allowed to do their job, and they should follow the rules of the statute. Us as building officials should also follow those rules. So with that, let's open up another poll. Celeste? I'm seeking to have everybody very confident after this. Okay. I'll give that as a 50-50. So, and you guys probably already knew all the stuff that I had mentioned. So, with that, I think we may have a couple minutes to.
I've got some questions here for you, Glenn.
There we go.
All right. So there are numerous questions in here, and so I'm just going to say we don't have unlimited time today, but perhaps we can put some of these question answers out later after this for the ones that we didn't get to. So one question a couple of people asked, I believe you covered it, Glenn. Can a private provider with a building code administrator license do inspections that they do not have a standard license in that trade, standard or inspections or plans review?
Okay, the answer to that is no. There's only one building official that can do all the inspections, and that is the building official or building code administrator that is employed or contracted with the local jurisdiction. A building code administrator that's a private provider, it contracts with a private entity, not with the jurisdiction, and they are not allowed to do inspections, plan review that they do not have certifications for. They would be required to have those certifications in that area, or either have a duly authorized representative that is doing those plan review and inspection.
All right. Shifting gears here a little bit. Every jurisdiction has different forms. Should we develop statewide mandated forms to make it easier for entities working across multiple jurisdictions?
That is something that we explored as the legislative committee last year. And we actually were looking at a state registration process, but it never got past bill drafting to get picked up and move forward. But that's something that we as an association recognize that would probably be a good thing. It would be good for both the building officials and for also the individuals that are providing private provider services to have a central registration process. Right now, we do not have it. We were looking at housing something on DVPR, since they are the licensing agent for all of the companies. But it's a good idea. Would love to see it happen. It would make it easier on the private providers and also make it easier on the jurisdictions. You would have one place to go.
Well, I seem to recall several years ago there was a move to do a statewide building permit to make it easier for the contractors, and that did not make its way through legislation either. So, can a municipality require a private provider plan reviewer? Can a municipality require a private provider plan reviewer to dictate the inspections required prior to the permit issuance?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I would say no. And the reason I'm saying no is I look at my plan reviewers don't specify which inspections are required. But as we're entering the results of those inspections, we do tell the private provider companies that you got to do remember the minimum inspections that are required in the Florida Building Code. So I think if my plans examiner had to do that, they would just go, you need to do all the inspections that are required in the Florida Building Code, because there's different type projects have different inspections that may or may not be required. It depends on what the project is. So I know that my plan reviewers don't do it, so I would not require a private provider plan reviewer to do it.
All right. There are a few questions in here about fees. Someone stated discounted fees should be standardized by the state. Some jurisdictions charge $4, $1,000 for $4,000 for permits, $4, $1,000 for permits with a 30% discount. Some charge $7 with only a 15% discount. I know there are several comments about fees, and then someone commented reduction of fees is bad. Private provider projects are not less work, they're just different type of work. We spend many hours on private provider jobs, and suggesting there should be an extra charge. Your thoughts on that, Glenn?
And I kind of beat that around a little bit. I would say it is, first of all, one point, it's very difficult to do the one shoe fits all and just say X is what you're going to do, because jurisdictions, until we went with a statewide process, which is probably never going to happen because it is so difficult. I've got different issues than, say, the county or the counties next to me. I'm a kind of a suburban type city with a couple 100,000 in population. Adjacent county has, maybe 60, 70,000 in population of a whole county. And to say that one shoe fits all is challenging. But I think you have to look at far as the reduction of fees, I think you need to analyze your process, and you got to break out the plan review and inspection, just portion that would be provided. I mean, our fees are, we don't give a big reduction because we do a lot of administrative work for the private providers by entering the inspection results they send to us, entering them in the system, processing and we're looking at maybe going to some type of automated system for that. If we went to some kind of automated system, then our staff time may be reduced. We may have to increase our reduction in fee. But I hear you. It seems like some private provider projects can be kind of to the second point. Seems like it's more work, but it is administrative work that it is. I would say this: you don't charge more for a problem project. And I say that because you have some projects that the contractor developer, it takes a lot more to get through that process than, say, another contractor and developer who is very familiar with the process and everything goes very smoothly and you don't have problems with it. So it could go both ways. I know we feel it. We have to do a lot with some private providers. Some of them have very good systems that work with us, and it's pretty much automated.
All right. Here's a question from early in the delivery of the webinar. What does equal access to documents mean? Equal to who or to what?
I've read that several times, and I would tell everybody just to go back to that section and read it. to try to figure out what it means, I went to some of my advisors and said, "Hey guys, what does this mean to you? Read it. Tell me." I done read it 5 times, and it'll read. I got 3 different answers out of it. But what I gathered from it is you have to provide um, uh, customer information, which may or may not have, or archive stuff that you may have that they need for to do their review, but it is for the private providers. You have to provide them access. I do not think it means you provide them access to your whole system, but for that particular job, I think if there's some information that has maybe been redacted or whatever, but you maybe have that information, that you have to provide them access to that.
All right. What if the private provider requests to do inspections only? Can the building office request they complete the plans review as well?
No, I don't think it can go both ways. I think it says if, and I haven't looked at this section in a while. It's back in, I believe, in section 2, that if they do the plan review, you can require them to do the inspections. Typically, we have projects where we do the plan review and issue the permit, and then we're notified that before any inspections are done, they has to be before the inspection starts with us, that they're going to use a private provider for the inspection services. So I don't think that you can, anticipate they're going to do the inspections only. We have 2 different processes basically set up in ours and we have 2 different free reduction of fees in our process, where the applicant tells us if they're going to use a private provider for plan review and inspections, or inspections only. If it says inspections only, we do the plan review, and then it's handed over. We know that the private provider is going to do the inspections.
All right. Does the same tolling period apply to multiple applications submitted simultaneously? For example, 100 new construction single-family permits submitted by the same entity on the same day.
I would treat those as individual applications, and I think you got, if they're submitted on the same day, you got 20 days for those applications. But they are individual applications. I don't think you can, it's interesting that they may submit that, and we see where they submit a bunch of applications at one time. Typically, if you're in a subdivision like that, they're going to be kind of redundant, so it should be relatively easy to get through them. More time is tied up with our environmental and zoning when it gets into that situation. But I mean, it would be 20 days per application. If every one of them was submitted on the day one, then it's 20 days from then.
All right. In regards to 553791, paragraph 18, should the insurance certificate be required? I can't even talk. Should the insurance certificate be required to be specific to the project site?
No, it's not specific to the project site. It is because typically what you'd have is the same thing you would have with contractors. We see general liability and also professional liability policies, and they come from the insurance. The certificates of insurance come from the insurance companies, and they're for that private provider company, not per the project. So, but you would have to make sure that if they're doing a larger project, you would have to look back at their insurance certificate and make sure that they have the proper coverage if they're doing a project that's over 5 million.
All right. Can a private provider release utilities, or is that only the building official?
That is only the building official, according to Chapter 1 of the Florida Building Code. That's an administrative function, not a plan review or an inspection function. So I definitely know we've got more layers here in my jurisdiction because we own our own utilities, the city of Tallahassee. It's in our electric manual, and it's also in the building code that they receive it, from our office. It is actually a email when we get notification from the private provider that they have done that inspection. We would just confirm and go out there, confirm that the meter is up on it or the meter base is up on it, and then we would send a email notification for our utilities to go connect the power. So it's an administrative function that we do, not an inspection function.
All right, there are a couple of different questions about the scope for architects and engineers performing plan review and inspections. Can architects or engineers do all inspections?
Yes.
Okay, I'll stop.
Yeah, they if you'll go into their statute, they at the very bottom of the 471, 481, they're allowed to do all the inspections that are listed in 468.
All right. Glenn, we do have many other questions, but we are running out of time. Like I said, I believe what we will do internally is we'll review these questions and create a document with some pointing you all in the right direction. And this session is going to be presented again at the end of the month. If anyone missed it, or if you want to attend again on the 29th. So I just want to say thank you, Glenn, for taking time out of your day to do this and to field these questions. And I appreciate everyone who took time out to participate and ask questions. Like I said, there are many more questions than we can possibly get through today. And who knows, maybe we just plan a Q&A day where we just get on the phone with a couple of building officials and throw some softballs at you.
Yeah, we can, and that would probably, I know the executive committee has discussed that. That may be something that we can post a panel with 2 or 3, because it's always interesting to get different people's perspective. So especially when you have a Q&A session like that. So I think we have one more poll that we got to put up, and so to kind of gather information for you. With that, I'm gonna step away.
All right, let's see. I know when you exit the session today, there will be an evaluation with an opportunity for you all to tell us what you're interested in and what other topics you're interested in. So there is a brief survey that's going to come up, and we have recorded this session. We hope to have it available on the website soon. And thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Have a good afternoon.
Real quick, sorry, and I did not mention this, guys that are on this, that we do have a frequently asked questions section on our website. I know that Ann sent that out earlier, but some of the same stuff is posted on there that we put that out. It's relatively new. It's only a couple months out there, but go on to our website at boaf.net and go to those that frequently asked question.
Yes, it's under resources. The FAQs flags out several different FAQ topics. We do have one specific to this statute. All right. Thank you all. Have a good day.